So let's talk a little bit about the latest trend in golf. And for anybody that follows golf somewhat closely, um, Bryson DeChambeau is an individual who has gained a fair amount of weight and muscle. Uh, as Mark had mentioned, up to 30 pounds. That might even be conservative in terms of muscle and mass. And Bryson is an individual who has tried a lot of different things in his game. He's kind of a thinker and a scientist, and he likes to experiment. And so his COVID experiment or his quarantine experiment was to really focus on strength and gaining mass and essentially seeing how far he can hit the ball, what sort of advantage that's going to give him competitively in terms of hitting the ball. So I don't know if I suggest gaining 30 pounds and just saying if I gain 30 pounds, I'm going to be good to go. But I will make a very intense argument for the fact that force, right? Let's go back to, I don't remember when, sometime, I'm sure high school physics or something like that, right? Force equals F equals ma. Force equals mass times acceleration. So, and by the way, for those of you that are watching, continue to feel free to type any comments or questions you have. We got plenty of time here today for another question, so make sure you type in anything that you have as you're watching. But force equals mass times acceleration. So let's put this very broadly, Mark, in golf terms. All right, how you add distance off the tee is by creating force. Okay, so there's really only two main ways that you can create more force. It's either by adding mass to the situation or adding acceleration to the situation. Okay, now funny enough, when you do one, a lot of times it helps the other, right? So if you add mass, strength, muscle, oftentimes it helps you add acceleration. Sometimes you can try to add acceleration and not add mass, and that doesn't always go well. For a lot of people, if they focus on trying to get fast without building prerequisite strength, so you can think about that equation, right? You're trying to add force and all you're doing is increasing acceleration, which in this case would be swing speed or how hard you speed, but you haven't increased mass. Yes, you've increased your force, and maybe you feel like, okay, I didn't bulk up, I didn't add muscle, so now I'm still flexible, right? And all that good stuff that people get worried about. But you do, I would argue that you do, just by adding acceleration, adding speed, but not adding strength or mass in this case, you do run the risk of a little bit more repetitive use or repetitive overuse type trauma to the body. So there are golfers on the tour who have focused on speed and probably strength, but speed, and they haven't necessarily gained mass, and they might be having some back problems now. They might be having some other problems. Others, they haven't had to gain mass to get stronger. So they've gotten stronger. They haven't added the mass component of the equation, but because they've gotten stronger, they've gained speed, and they have also reduced the risk of injury. But Mark, what I would say is if you went about it right, and you gained muscle mass and even just some fat mass, for lack of a better term, and you also work on all the other right things, you're going to inherently gain mass, and then you're also going to gain acceleration, plus you're going to have the positive effect of injury prevention that muscle strength gives you, right? There is a very big, I'll hopefully not go off on one too big here. If I hear one more person say, but what if I get too big for golf, I'm going to lose my mind, to put it frankly, because there are people that work very hard to gain mass, muscle mass, and they still can't, right? Like, for you to actually get big enough and strong enough to where you actually get to that point where now you're saying, oh my gosh, I've gained 5-10 pounds of muscle, and might that negatively affect my golf game? That's very hard to do in the first place. And even if you do that, the research and a lot of the things that we see lately are telling us that it's actually going to benefit you massively for your golf game and also reduce your risk of injury. Okay, now quick story, and then I'll put this question kind of to rest. So again, force equals mass times acceleration. If you increase your mass, you increase your force, but you also likely increase your acceleration piece. so therefore the force is going to multiply. That's what Bryson's trying to do. If you just gain fat to do it, I can't argue that you'll still get mass, which is still potentially going to help the force, but you might not have the right kind of mass, I guess is the way I put it. But there was a time, I'm going to botch the time frame of it, but it was maybe last year or the year before. Brooks Koepka, he went off and he really focused on his fitness, right? And this was in an article, and I'm not saying anything that he hasn't said or anything that's I might be straying a couple words here or there, but this is directly from him. So he worked on getting after it in terms of his fitness, right? He was doing a fair amount of cardio and a fair amount of interval training to where he was getting the metabolic effect of losing fat and losing weight. And then when he came back and started hitting, he actually wasn't. He said he wasn't performing as well because he wasn't eating cheeseburgers. He lost weight and he didn't have that mass. And an individual that I admire greatly told him, and then Brooks kind of had replicated this in his article. He said, because force equals mass times acceleration, I lost the mass and I didn't gain much in my swing speed. Therefore, I wasn't hitting the ball as far, and he felt like it was a huge detriment to his golf game. So that is a question that's, again, specific to golf, but I would argue in any major sport where you're not going to be penalized or you're not going to lose performance for having increased weight. As long as it's muscle mass, it can really only benefit you, right? It can only benefit you in terms of the force that your body can produce, so from a sports performance standpoint. But then injury prevention wise, the more stress that your muscles can take, the less stress falls onto your joints and your discs and your nerves and all these other structures, okay? So there's a point of diminishing return, of course. You go crazy and that's all you do, and you don't focus on mobility, you don't focus on your skill on the course or on the range or in any sport. All you do is focus on getting big and getting mass and getting strong, but you don't focus on these other quadrants. You don't focus on hydration, you don't focus on nutrition, you don't focus on sleep, you don't focus on recovery. Well, of course, there's going to be a point where you go overboard, right? And I don't know, Tiger maybe even did that at some point when he was running 5 miles in the morning, working out, hitting 500 balls, and then running 5 miles again. I don't even want to go to say that was what caused some of his problems, but there is a certain point in time where you reach a point of diminishing return, right? What's the goal you have in mind for something? What's the outcome you're looking for? And does it accomplish that? And right now, Bryson, I mean, if you're going to argue against it, 6-7 straight top 10s. He's already won now last week. The guy's going to be the favorite for most of the majors this year. I mean, if you want to argue against it, throw out some science and some stats and whatnot. But so far, it's working. I'm not going to really bet against him much. I think you'll see that trend continue. Guys like Brooks, other guys, Rory's been focusing on this strength for a while. I mean, it's not a secret anymore. I don't know why people want to try to keep diminishing it. I have a hunch, that I just created a new word, combination of hint and hunch. I have a hunch that people don't want to put in the work. So therefore, they don't want that to become an actual thing, because then that means to keep up with other people, they would have to put in more work. So that's just a hinge, though, combination of a hint and a hunch, that people want the quick, easy way, and so therefore, instead of actually putting in the work to get stronger and focus on their craft, they'll make excuses and badmouth others. So.